What's up, my dog? You gonna come say hello? Come here. Up. Up. Say hello to the folk. Say hello. Say hello. You saying hello? You saying hello? Sorry. Cuddles are more important. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hello and welcome again to Krachtwerken. I want to have a quick talk about Spotify because there's so much negativity around Spotify, and I believe to a certain extent, rightly so. So, well, I think this relates to all streaming services, really. So, Spotify pays very little to the artists. I mean, like 0.04 cents or pence or whatever currency. So the idea is that Spotify's really bad. They make a shitload of money. If you have the free version, you've got constant ads. You can only listen to songs so many times. And if you pay like £9 a month, roughly. I think it's now nearly 10. However, the artist gets a fraction every time a song plays. So there's this dependency between Spotify couldn't exist without the artists. Spotify makes a lot of money. The artists don't make a lot of money. And people wanting to boycott, especially big artists and stuff like that. Boycotting Spotify, wanting to boycott Spotify or making claims and stuff like that. Now, firstly, a couple of things. Number one, artists have always been screwed. It's like the nature of things. You're artists, you're poor until you die, and then 100 years later you're famous and your paintings go for millions. Artists are just never valued, not in the creative industry, in the business industry, never. They're just never really valued at all. And the only reason certain artists are really popular is because they have basically been PR'd to the max by big companies, and the companies have exploited them just as much as Spotify exploits people. Now this is not a very in-depth, educated, research-based rant. This is more about kind of the vibes and what you see. So I'm more than happy this to be a bit of a discussion and for people to have their opinions on this. So from a personal point of view, I like alternative music, stoner music, metal, all this kind of stuff. And in the mainstream, there's hardly any of that. We all know that. There's a couple of big obvious bands, Slipknots and the Metallicas and all the usual. But there's thousands upon thousands of really good bands out there who never see the light of day. And Spotify and also YouTube to a big extent have gives you the possibility of finding them. Number one, it also gives them the ability to be found. In the olden days, before the internet, a band would become kind of biggish in a very small area and go nowhere unless they become famous, unless they get spotted and signed and all the usual things. Now the same thing applies, but just on a worldwide audience, thanks to something like Spotify. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to give some pros to Spotify, and then I'll talk about the negatives later. And by Spotify, I kind of mean most streaming service, but Spotify is always the one that's really kind of in the limelight about this. So the amount of bands that I found through Spotify recommendations are immense, and I listen to them often. So that's one good thing for a band to be noticed and get their stuff out and published, but also for people to find the stuff. The other thing, YouTube does the same, is very good for it. Now, on the counter, these people put a lot of hard work into their music, and they end up putting it on Spotify, and they see no return financially, at least. I don't really see that as any different from in the old days when you had a band and you were gigging everywhere for free, and you were sending CDs and tapes out to radio stations for free, and you were giving pals and everybody that you could copies of it just to get the word out, you were also down. You were probably financially down more than you are now. So a couple of good things have happened in the last, dare I say, 15 years, 20, 15, 10 years maybe. Firstly, recording something half decent is cheaper. Gear is cheaper. Recording gear is cheaper. You can do a lot of things in the bedroom. So for an artist or a band to actually make music is so much cheaper and quicker and easier. And at the same time, getting it out there with the likes of DistroKid and CD Baby and all this, it's just so much easier to get it out there as well. And so the complaint is, well, I put it on Spotify and I hardly, I don't get any money for it, but they're making millions. So in my head, I was thinking this through. That firstly, nothing has changed. The artist gets screwed just like before and always will be. Because essentially, you've got two problems as an artist. You need to get the word out. And once you have the word out, you also hope to God that they like it and actually buy it and make the effort or spend the money. That'll never change. So in my opinion, the only real issue with Spotify is the fact that Spotify, for example, makes a lot of money and the rest don't. But they're symbiotic. The one couldn't be without the other. So I was thinking about this. I put out an album, 8-track album, and it's on Spotify, and I've had maybe 2,000 plus listens to it. And I was working out the amount of money I'd make from it. It's probably going to be like £8 if I'm lucky. That's pathetic. So 2,000 people have played. Spotify has made money and I get hardly anything. But if I didn't have Spotify, my music wouldn't have been out. I would have to somehow press with my own money CDs and all sorts of stuff and try and get it to people, or rent a server and host them there and stream it myself and all these different things. And if I stream it myself, I'm even more problematic for people to find it because it's not in the place where everybody goes to, like Spotify or YouTube. So exponentially, it just gets worse and worse and worse without the likes of Spotify. The other thing is to try and address this, and I've not made the math. I'm sure somebody cleverer than me can do it. But if Spotify gives you 0.04 roughly to 0.08, 0.08 for every track listen after 30 seconds, imagine the amount of money they would have to pay out if they started giving what we would perceive as a fair per play price, 2 pence, 3 pence, something like that. So every time somebody listens to my track, Spotify would pay me 2 to 3 pence or whatever. And it's starting to feel more kind of fair. Now, Spotify's made a fucking ton of money, right? But if you take the amount of plays per day, and do you then start multiplying it by a couple of pence, I bet you that Spotify will make zero money. In fact, they'll probably just not get anywhere. They'll probably be in debt, like the likes of SoundCloud and all the others, who perpetually are in debt because they keep growing and giving little bits for free and this and that and the other. So I think the problem that the likes of Spotify might have, and I'm spitballing here because I obviously don't know, and I'm more than happy for people to jump in here, is that they either pay you very little and give you that service. The result is they make a shitload of money. Fair enough. Not entirely fair, or it definitely feels very unfair. But there's no middle ground. So if they then want to change their ways and actually pay a fair per play amount, the jump is so big that they will make no money and will not be able to invest in all sorts of things for the platform. So that's an opinion here that really is, that is a possibility that might be the case. So up until that point where they pay artists what an artist would perceive to be fair, everything beyond under that the artist will never be happy. So me personally, I will use Spotify and I will listen to Spotify and I'll pay them monthly and listen to my music that I want to listen to, and be happy with the fact that I'm getting screwed. If I was a signed artist, like so many, I mean the industry is rife for that, they get screwed by their managers, their agents, their record labels, their publishers. They get screwed all the time as well. Now, this is not a defeatist post. It's not saying, well, if everybody else screws artists, why can't Spotify? I think what I'm saying is that Spotify, to me, is a place for the pauper, the underdog. It is a place where we can get our music out, and we can find music that is not necessarily mainstream. So staying away from the radio stations and all the obvious kind of bullshit shit that gets thrown at you from all sides, which is just regurgitated shit. The Ed Sheeran shit and all that nonsense. Being bombarded with that. Whereas there is just this underbelly of immense amount of music, and if you just go onto Spotify and start looking, and in YouTube and places like that, you find incredible music all the time. So it does have a weapon there. It does have a way of people getting noticed and people putting their music out. And if they really work hard at playing the whole Spotify game and creating playlists and sharing playlists and getting other people to follow playlists and doing all that stuff, over time they can actually make a little bit of money of it, which is also something that you didn't get in the past. You just never made any money. Your CDs cost you money, your tapes cost you money, nobody bought your stuff, venues didn't pay you to play, you were carting your shit around everywhere. Your band might go for 3-4 years, you might get one shitty demo recorded because it was so expensive, and gone. Nowadays music can be produced, and obviously there's a lot of shit in there, but there's also a lot of good stuff in there. So personally, as unfairly as they treat people, and as unfair as the whole music industry and art industry and all these things are, I think we live in a good time for an artist to actually get their word out there. It also puts the power back to the artist, because with a bit of effort they can possibly actually make something happen. So I'm with most people. I think it's an unfair system, and I don't know what the solution is. Actually, there is a solution, and afterthought, the way that Spotify can pay their artists properly, and by paying them more, they will need more money, and therefore the consumer will have to pay more. So instead of £9 a month, they'll be paying 20, 30, 40, whatever amount of money. Now, this is another thing. It's the consumer's fault to a big degree, because the consumer is not prepared to do that. The most amount of people don't want to listen to Spotify. They want to pay the money. They will listen to stuff on YouTube, videos that have been, stolen, or albums that have been ripped onto it. They are not prepared to pay for it. Now, this is going to be a next video, because the consumer really is the one that needs to be pulled apart here. If the consumer was willing to pay a real price, if I think about how much I listen to on Spotify a month, if I had to buy that in CDs, I'd be a poor man, So there are pros and cons, there are benefits, and I think the consumer is the one who really, at the end of the day, needs to cough up as well. Not just, the corporations that have to pull their part, but the consumer as well. Everybody wants everything for dirt cheap and free. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.